Good afternoon. We're just going to start in a couple of minutes. We're still waiting on some folks who are battling beltway traffic. So please, hop on those folks up. Testing 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. How's that sounding? Keep talking. We're testing the stream, live stream, so she has things. A little bit more? Oh, I just remembered a joke I shared with the congregation on Easter. What did one egg say to the other? Heard any good jokes lately? Thank you. I'm always glad to meet some fellow customers. Like that? All right. Is that good? joining us online to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're joining us from. If this is your first time in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we extend a warm welcome to you. We're part of the congregational lineage of Christian congregations, and over a century ago we chose to build our religious community on the values of how we respect and treat each other despite our different beliefs and ideas, rather than on uniformity of belief. As an non-creedal community, we honor religious wisdom and spiritual truth wherever we find it, be it in the great religious traditions of the world, in nature, science, or in our own hearts. And during times of grief, like today, we use our memorial services to celebrate the life of our loved one, rather than as a proclamation of faith. We acknowledge that each of us brings our own spiritual understandings of life and death and the interval in between, finding solace in those understandings as we navigate loss. Today we gather to pay tribute to Jeanne Pearson, summoned by our respect and affection. We come together to comfort one another, acknowledging the profound loss we have experienced. And like countless generations before us, we gather to honor a life well lived, Jeanne's life. We cannot hope to encompass all aspects of Jeanne's life and legacy in this service, but by sharing together, we enrich our understanding of who she was as a person. Our greatest gift today that we can give to one another, and our most fitting tribute to Jeanne, is to hold her in our hearts and memories as fully as possible. And through our stories, our memories, and our love, to give her back to each other again and again. In this spirit of remembrance and celebration, let us begin. As is the custom of our faith tradition, we open this sacred time with the lighting of the chalice. Today, this is the flame of memory and hope that we carry within us as we remember and honor Jeanne. We acknowledge that a human life is sacred in its beginning and in its end. As Emma, Sammy, and Tim come forward to kindle the chalice, I invite us to rise together in body or in spirit to share the chalice lighting words in your order of service. Let us speak together. We light this chalice in loving memory, beloved friend and spiritual companion, Jeanne Pearson, and in tribute to the love a single life can inspire. May the chalice remind us of the extravagant gift of life. May it signify the community we create in our being together and our sharing together. Thank you. You may be seated.
A reading from 1 Corinthians. If I speak with the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. Faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love.
Please rise in body or in spirit to sing Morning Has Broken, number 38. Great. Please be seated. Jeanne Kepner Pearson's journey began on October 1st, 1921, in Converse, Indiana, where she was born to Paul and Marjorie Kepner. She was their only child. Both of her parents, having briefly taught school, transitioned into farming, with her father eventually pursuing a career with the Department of Agriculture after completing college. Jeanne spent her early years on their farm in Indiana, riding a horse carriage to school. When Jeanne was around 6 or 7 years old, her father, who had earned a fellowship to Cornell University, moved the family to Ithaca, New York, leaving behind their life on the farm. And later, during the Depression era, they relocated to Washington, D.C., where he started working at the Department of Agriculture. Jeanne graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School before attending the University of Maryland, get a degree in home economics. She briefly worked as a cryptographer for the Department of the Navy. On March 12, 1943, Jeanne married John W. Pearson, fondly known as Jack. Together, they welcomed 3 children into their lives: John, Paul, and Margie. Jeanne leaves behind a legacy of 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and 2 great-great-grandchildren. She was preceded in death by her husband Jack, her son-in-law Ken, and her grandson Greg. Throughout her life, Jeanne found joy in various activities, including bowling, horseback riding, driving, solving crossword puzzles, reading, and cooking. Right? That's a family joke. Jeanne and Jack were founding members of what would become the Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist congregation. From its humble beginnings in the Women's Club on Connecticut Avenue, Jeanne played an active role in the church community for many years. She lent her voice to the choir and played a pivotal role in bringing the organ to Cedar Lane, and led the office volunteer team for many, many years, leaving a lasting impact on this congregation. Jeanne passed away peacefully on February 18th, 2024, at the age of 102, surrounded by her 3 children, both daughters in love and her eldest grandson. We miss Jeanne.
Farewell, my friends. It was beautiful as long as it lasted, the journey of my life. I have no regrets whatsoever, save the pain I'll leave behind. Those dear hearts who love and care, and the heavy with sleep, ever moist eyes, the smile in spite of a lump in the throat, and the strings pulling at the heart and soul. The strong arms that held me up when my own strength let me down, each morsel that I was fed with was full of love. At every turning of my life, I came across good friends, friends who stood by me, even when time raced me by. Farewell, my friends. I smile and bid you goodbye. Shed no tears, for I need them not. All I need is your smile. If you feel sad, do think of me, for that's what I'll like. When you live in the hearts of those you love, remember then, you never die.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Reverend Giaminacci. John and Margie and I and our entire family want to thank you all for coming over to join us this afternoon for the celebration of the life of our mother, Jeanne Kepner Pearson. Actually, her full name was Velma Jean Margaret Kepner Pearson. She hated that. She was simply known to her friends as Jeanne or Keppy. In reflecting on my mother's life, it occurred to me that perhaps I should devote 1 minute for each year of her life. But then I realized we would be here most of the afternoon, and I'm not going to do that to you. Jeanne was a wonderful and magnificent woman. As the Reverend Giaminacci indicated, she was born on a farm in Indiana, Converse, Indiana. She loved being on the farm. She loved being with the animals. And she was somewhat mischievous. She had a dog whose name I cannot remember, but one day she was sitting at the window with her dog by her side, and there were some cows or sheep out front in the yard, and Jeanne leaned over and said, "Sick 'em." The dog went right through the window and started chasing the sheep. Her mother came running out to see what had happened, and Jeanne looked up and said totally innocently, "I have no idea what just happened." When she was 6 or 7, they moved up to Ithaca, New York, where our grandfather attended Cornell University. And Jeanne loved Ithaca. She was able to get out and engage in all kinds of adventures. She loved ice skating on the frozen ponds and lakes and sledding down a particular hill. When Patty and I were up in Ithaca for a wedding several years ago, I saw this hill, and she had mentioned the name of the street that they sledded down, and we looked at it, and it was one of these hills where you couldn't see the road until you got right up to the edge. It was that steep. So I called and asked her, what was the name of that hill you went sledding on? And she told me again, and indeed, it was this incredibly steep hill. So we gained new respect for her. Once they moved to the Washington area, during the early years of the Depression. Mom went to high school, and then she went on to the University of Maryland, where she wanted to major in English. She always wanted to major in English. She loved the English language. Her father, however, said, if a girl is going to go to college, she's going to major in home economics. And he had his way. So Mom reluctantly ended up with a degree in home economics. But her heart was always with the English language. And for her entire career, her entire life, she remained the grammar police. She would correct us whenever we said something wrong, and I can't help but do the same thing to this day. The degree in home economics was a bit of a joke, as the Reverend indicated, to the family, because Mom was not much of a cook. She was very good at lots of things. Cooking was not one of them. In fact, if we were all in the house and the smoke detector went off, all three of us would say in unison, "Dinner's ready." While she was at the University of Maryland, she wanted to take flying lessons, which were offered through the university. But because of the onset of World War II, they banned women from the program. They no longer allowed women into the program, so she was never able to pursue that. She did, however, take a welding class while she was in college. During or shortly after graduation, as Reverend Giaminacci indicated, she worked briefly as a cryptographer or crypto-analyst for the Department of the Navy. She never really did tell us what she did during those years. She was always very active with us kids. One time I recall, somewhere along the way, she became a crack shot with a rifle. I have no idea where. But one day she took John and a friend of his, Jack, and me out target shooting at this old abandoned farm. And we were shooting at cans on fences and whatever, and Jack kept missing. And so Mom kind of chuckled, and Jack said, "You think you could do better?" Without even getting out of the car, Mom leaned out the window and took the can off the rail with her first shot. Jack didn't say another word all the way home. Mom was always very active and very healthy, except for some arthritis in her knees and later in her hands. She loved pulling weeds around the house. One day I went over to visit when she was in her upper 80s or maybe even early 90s, and I found her out in the front yard, up on a stepladder with an electric chainsaw trimming limbs off a tree. I suggested to her this was not a good idea. So when I went home that day, I took the chainsaw with me. Over the years, Mom enjoyed horseback riding from the time she was a little girl, riding, bowling, bicycling, and playing bridge, along with doing the daily crossword puzzles, and of course playing the piano and the organ. She loved to drive. Well into her late 80s, early 90s, she and sometimes a friend would take long drives off into the countryside. One of her last road trips was all the way down to Montpelier in Orange County. She finally decided to stop driving, so we did not have to have that difficult conversation with her. She made that choice on her own. After our father retired, the two of them traveled the world together and had fabulous adventures, including riding a variety of different animals. In the reception hall, you will see pictures of her riding, among other things, a camel, an ostrich, and I forget what all else is out there. At one point, she and Dad were on a trip to Nepal, and they were at a resort called Tiger Tops. And the monsoon season came early. The bus that was supposed to take them back to town couldn't make the trip, so they were evacuated on elephants. They mounted the elephants, took them across the river, and then started up the bank on the other side. My father told me that as they went up the bank, he would watch this big elephant put this massive foot on the ground and then watch it slide backwards. He was convinced the elephant was going to fall over backwards on him, but it didn't, fortunately. As Reverend Giaminacci said, she was one of the founding members of what became the Unitarian Universalist Church of Cedar Lane, and was very active in bringing the organ, which you heard earlier, to the church. She was a warm, loving, gregarious, mischievous, self-deprecating, tenacious, and stubborn woman. Once she decided that something needed to be done, there was no stopping her. One thing about which she was always adamant was that she did not want to leave her beloved home and move into an assisted living facility. And thanks largely to Margie, she was able to accomplish that. She stayed in the house right up till the end. The house that she had moved into in 1952. She had, as you heard, 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, and 2 great-great-grandchildren, which makes me the great-grandfather. Not bad for an only child from a farm in Indiana. She died on Sunday, February 18, 2024, at the age of 102. Amazingly, and somewhat ironically, this was the same date on which our father died 24 years earlier. He died on February 18, 2000, and somehow I think Mom knew that. All 3 of us and our wives and my oldest, Kevin, were there when she died. It was quiet and peaceful and not a bad way to go. There's an old Irish saying, may you live to be 100 years with an extra year to repent. For whatever reason, Mom needed 2 extra years. Her ashes will be placed along with those of her beloved husband, Jack, at Arlington National Cemetery at some point in the future. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
So that leaves me the great-grandmother. I tried to be a good grandmother, but now, great. When Margie asked me to say a few words today, I thought of 1,000 or so Jeanne anecdotes. But those aren't my anecdotes. They belong to John and Paul and Margie. So what would I say about Jeanne after knowing her for just 55 years? Yes, she was quick, self-deprecating, optimistic, energetic, and fearless in a lot of ways. She was also a woman of principle. She was willing to give of her time and talent to the things she believed in. I remember soon after I joined the family hauling huge amounts of salad over here from Fairfax for a fundraising banquet. And as I recall, I think it was here, and I believe it was to bring attention and support, financial support, for passing a fair housing law in the area. She believed in that, in making her community a better, fairer place, enough to volunteer to plan the event and make the food, despite how much she hated to cook. I also remember coming here to sing in the Messiah. Again, it was a fundraiser, not a service. And I believe that one was to raise money for Jeanne's beloved organ, which she was, dare we say, instrumental in acquiring. You will hear it again later on. Jeanne believed in improving the facilities here that would help this congregation, which she had helped found, thrive. Jeanne also believed in taking life as it came, no whining. Admittedly, she had a pretty charmed life. But I witnessed her no whining principle on occasion when life threw hard things at her. I can still see her sitting up a bit straighter, lifting her chin, setting her jaw, and saying, well, so be it. Jeanne Pearson never whined. She believed in accepting people, all people. That was a key principle in this congregation and for her individually. But we know that principles are not always easy to live up to. So I have one Jeanne anecdote that's mine, all mine. And it involves living up to that principle of accepting people. In 1969, Jeanne's son, Paul, met the girl that he knew was the one and brought her home to meet his parents. But when Jeanne discovered that that girl, the one, was an Irish Catholic Democrat, It was a tough pill to swallow. She got through it with grace and graciousness, and it wasn't until long after that I realized just how big a struggle she had had with Paul's choice. We had hosted Thanksgiving dinner, and after we were finished, she and I were in the kitchen. I was up to my elbows in suds and dishwater, and when I turned around, Jeanne suddenly, out of the blue, gave me a huge hug, suds and all. Now, while Jeanne was a very loving person, she was not demonstrative, so I was a bit surprised by that hug. But before I could react, she stepped back, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I've owed you that for 15 years. I loved her for that, for her quiet acknowledgement of the struggle she'd had and the acknowledgement of her victory over that struggle and mine. She was in her 60s at that point, and I am beyond grateful that she and I had another 40 years more with lots of hugs. By that time, the family had grown in size and diversity, and it continued to grow in size and diversity, and she welcomed every new member with enthusiasm. So I will miss Jeanne, but so be it, no whining.
Let's say goodbye with a smile, dear, just for a while, dear. We must part. Don't let the parting upset you. I'll not forget you, sweetheart. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. After the rain comes the rainbow. You'll see the rain go. Never fear. We can wait for tomorrow. Goodbye to sorrow, my dears. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song.
When I Go by Donna Ashworth. When I go, don't learn to live without me. Just learn to live with my love in a different way. And if you need to see me, close your eyes or look in your shadow when the sun shines. I'm there. Sit with me in the quiet and you will know that I did not leave. There is no leaving when one soul is blended with another. When I go, don't learn to live without me. Just learn to look for me in the moments. I will be there. I'm pretty short. Thank you. I'm trying to remember exactly how I got to know Jeanne. We were both in the choir, but I was on this side of the loft and she was on that side of the loft, so I don't think I had real close communication with her then. Somewhere along the line, I decided that I wanted to volunteer at the front desk as a receptionist. At this time, the volunteers were known as the call girls, and Jeanne was the madam. Jeanne was my supervisor. She gave me a thorough introduction to what my responsibilities were going to be. She knew all of the schedules of the staff. She knew our schedules. It was really important during that time that we welcomed people coming into the church. That was one of our responsibilities. Also, we screened calls, we left notes for the staff. We were really an integral part of the front desk activities. She spent many hours working on the schedule. Sometimes she would call me during the week if somebody had an illness or had to cancel their responsibilities, and often I could fill in. And usually she said, well, if I can't get anybody, I'm going to be at the front desk. I don't know really how many times she filled in for people. Each spring, Jeanne would host a tea for all of the volunteers that had worked at the reception desk. It was a potluck, and listening to her, the stories of her culinary skills, maybe that explained it. She had a beautiful home, and we loved to go there. She invited present volunteers as well as past volunteers, and we got to see her beautiful garden. We knew that she loved to work in the garden until her arthritis prohibited her from doing that. But that was one of the highlights of our year of volunteering. When she retired, she approached me and asked if I would take on the responsibility of supervising the volunteers. And I wasn't real confident in this, but she was very supportive and she was very encouraging, and she convinced me, despite my technical deficiencies, that I could do it. So anytime, when she left, that anytime I had a problem, I had a question, she was always available for a phone conversation. So I will remember Jeanne with gratitude and with kindness, and I will miss her.
It was sometime in the mid-60s when I first came to this church. I was visiting with a friend, and I had no notion of joining a church, but I was just overwhelmed with the choir singing and with the organ music. And I think on the spot, I said, I need to be in that choir. And so I did. I joined the choir. And that's how I came to know Jeanne Pearson. She was in the alto section, and because we had such a small tenor section then, our music director had said, well, could you please join the tenor section? So since we had so many altos, and sometimes the music required reinforcements for the tenors, Jeanne and some other altos would join with us in singing. So she would be sitting beside me, singing confidently. Not all the altos appreciated being asked to sing tenor, but it didn't faze Jeanne at all. I think she loved singing in the choir and was an excellent singer. She was proud of having perfect pitch, and I got to know her and enjoyed her sharp wit, feisty spirit, and her zest for living. She was a lot of fun to be around. And as you've heard, of course, music was her passion, singing and the organ. If you knew Jeanne, you might remember that she had clear opinions about things. You do remember. And she wasn't shy about letting you know what she thought. You really didn't have any guesswork. So she might have an opinion about some of the musical selections we were doing, and perhaps she became disappointed in later years if the organ was not being played enough. And she didn't particularly like when we had to come down from the choir loft and sing downstairs. So she had her way of letting the powers that be know about her opinions. So I'm not sure exactly when she joined the choir. It must have been several years before I did. When it became too difficult, of course, in later years for her to manage the stairs to the loft, she did retire. And I'm thinking she probably was a member of our choir for probably close to 60 years. So what makes somebody sing in a choir for that long? And a friend recently remarked to me that music can reach places in our hearts that words alone cannot. And I think this is true for listeners as well as the choir singers. And many in our choir have been here for a long time. So, speaking for myself and our fellow choir members, with gratitude, we celebrate the gift of Jeanne singing with us for so many years, and we miss her.
Jeanne was an amazing presence here at the front desk. and she was a presence that one could not ignore. And she had a way of welcoming people in when they would show up, wanting to know something or had a question, and a way of engaging the staff to be responsive to whatever that people needed. And it was really a ministry of hospitality that Jeanne provided. And she persevered singing in the choir, even when it was getting challenging for her to get up those stairs. And I was just thinking today that how much she would have loved that new elevator. I mean, and it was really a labor of love for her. But it was out of her deep love and joy for music and how much it filled her soul. And she was a Republican and very thoughtful, opinionated Republican. And when she found out that my wife and I were, as my wife put it, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, well, she was, yes. It took her a while, but, eventually, I remember her telling my wife one day, saying, "Lolita, I still love you, even though you're a Democrat." So, today, as we honor and celebrate the remarkable life of Jeanne Pearson, a cherished member of our community whose journey spanned an incredible 102 years. Paul, I thought the extra year was for her to celebrate, repent and celebrate. We're reminded of Dr. Maya Angelou's poignant words from her poem, "When Great Trees Fall." When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We're not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves, like a great tree, Jeanne stood tall and strong, her roots deeply embedded in the soil of her convictions and her principles. She was a force of life, with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes and a sharpness of mind that remained undimmed by the passing of time. Her journey of 37,395 days on this earth was nothing short of remarkable. And she wore her age with pride, her spine straightening each time she was reminded of her century-spanning milestone. And from her early years on the family farm to her adventures in different corners of the country, Jeanne embodied resilience, determination, and an unwavering commitment to her beliefs. Feisty and opinionated and sometimes obstinate, she navigated the world with a tenacity that inspired all who knew her. and her sharp wit and keen intellect made her a force to be reckoned with, and her unwavering convictions guided her through life's ups and downs. Now, despite being a proud Republican, Jeanne defied political stereotypes and was known also for her struggle to get herself to be open-minded and accepting to engage with different perspectives. She told me she famously voted for Obama, a decision that reflected her commitment to values of justice, equity, and compassion. And in an era of division and discord, she stood firm in her convictions, never afraid to speak out against injustice or intolerance. She had some thoughts and opinions about Trump. Jeanne's journey was a testament to the power of resilience of the human spirit. And as she faced the challenges of aging with grace and dignity, her passion for life, her zest for life remained undiminished by the passage of time. Her legacy of love, courage, and service will continue to inspire us for generations to come. In the words of Dr. Angelou, and when great souls die, after a period peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed, they existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Jeanne existed. We can be and be better, for Jeanne existed. Jeanne's passing leaves a void in our hearts and in the fabric of our community. But just as the great tree leaves behind a legacy of shelter, shade, and sustenance, Jeanne's memory will continue to nourish and sustain us in the days ahead. May her memory be a blessing to us all, and may we strive to honor her legacy by living lives of integrity, empathy, and kindness. May it be so. I invite us now to rise in body or in spirit to sing Amazing Grace, number 205. May the echoes of Jeanne's life reverberate within us like the majestic chords of Widor's toccata, filling our hearts with awe and inspiration. May her memory be a guiding light, illuminating our paths with wisdom and grace. May we carry forward the legacy of her love, her courage, and her unwavering spirit, honoring her life in all that we do. And as we go forth from this place, may we be filled with the assurance that Jeanne's spirit will forever dwell within us, a source of comfort, strength, and enduring love. Go in peace, friends. Go making peace, living gently, loving fiercely, and knowing that Jeanne's spirit will always be with us. So may it be. Amen. Please be seated for the